Welcome back. So, one of my favorite features of the entire year is, of course, when we get to Women's Month and we start profiling some phenomenal women. And today is no different as we continue with these profiles during this year. We are focusing this morning on Gloria Serobe, who is the founding member and chief executive officer of Women Investment Portfolio Holdings, or WIPHOLD. Now, she holds many non-executive directorship positions in huge corporates, including being chair of the Independent Ports Regulator, chairperson of Life's Office Association, and chair of Metropolitan Group. Ms. Serobe recently launched her book as well. It's titled An Ode to My Mother-in-Law, Winnie Serobe, honoring her mother-in-law, whom she referred to as Mama. And she joins us now virtually to have a discussion, just to get to know her better and also celebrate her during this Women's Month. Ms. Serobe, thanks so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Sakina.
So firstly, we talk so much, about women's issues during Women's Month. But what for you do you think is the most important issue that we should be honing in on as women in 2023?
I think we still have to brief each other about the mandate to put women in the mainstream of the economy. We need to talk a lot more about that, because we are doing a bit better in terms of creating the professionals. They are becoming the bosses and CEOs in big corporates. We've got CAs, we've got lawyers now. I think what is missing now is that the job of having to transform on this matter of women, we're not briefing each other correctly. And so sometimes we accuse them of not being transformational. We need to talk a lot more about that.
And I like what you're saying there, because ultimately it all comes down to the economy in terms of how well we are able to pull ourselves up our bootstraps and thrive as a society, Ms. Serobe. And, you think back some time ago when he was still the president, Thabo Mbeki spoke about the economy and, these two economies, the two worlds that we live in, essentially as South Africans. And it doesn't seem as though much has changed in that regard, but it's one thing waiting for government to do and the policies to change or be implemented, and it's quite another to try and propel ourselves as women. So what do you think we can do in terms of, the short to medium term, low-hanging fruit that we can start off on as women?
The low-hanging fruit, Sanita, is exactly where we were in terms of being excluded. That is an opportunity for any sector in the business. The example would be that, for example, women were not allowed to own property, for example, and now can. And so for the market, for the property sector, that's a big market. We didn't have telephones in our homes, and so there's MTN, Vodacom. They are doing well because now they are also in those areas where telecoms was not. And so I think the issue of transformation is meant to be value-adding in the end, and partly because the opportunity is exactly where the exclusions did happen. When you actually put these people into the mainstream economy, whether it is the SMMEs or the small businesses or the big businesses, if women were excluded, it meant 50% of the country was excluded. And so if you include them, any CEO in this country that doesn't see that as an opportunity, to be honest, must be fired as far as I'm concerned, because you are bringing a whole new game into the economic system, and it can only make a difference in the country. That's what transformation is meant to do.
Are you surprised, Ms. Serobe, by just how paralyzed we seem as a nation, and especially on the transformation front? Because right up front, you spoke about the fact that we do now have women who are educated and who have been appointed to positions of power within corporates and in the public sector as well. But the reality is that black businesses still complain about being sidelined when it comes to funding. And many of the SMMEs say that they hear about BEE, but they are yet to experience its benefits to, a great extent. So let's talk about that, the causes of this. And as a business leader, how do we deal with these matters?
Our jobs again now, as the people who come from these places of exclusion, is to learn these ropes. So if you're in a banking system, we have to learn about credit and credit processes and so on, and make it our business to understand how do you translate that into why black business is always failing in terms of passing the test when it comes to credit applications. We have to be able to use the knowledge and intellectual capacity that we now have and take it back to the rural areas in terms of translating that lifestyle of the rural people and make them fit into the sophisticated systems of banking, of financial services, and everything else. Because what has really happened is that the intellectual capacity are sitting somewhere else, and the people who need the help are sitting somewhere else. And so I think as the people who come from this horrible background, we need to force that integration and make these things practical and doable, even for people who were never meant to be in the system before. That, for me, is what the transformation. So I'm putting more burden on us, Sakina, if you notice, because the policies of government are now there. I'm not capable of saying they're perfect, but we do have policies now. And those policies have managed to achieve a few things. And I think those few things we have achieved, let's now make them practical for these people that we think the policies were meant for. And that's going to take the people who know exactly where these people are. We come from rural towns, we come from townships, and we know better what is lacking there. And we should be those agents of change now that we have some understanding of how the other world works. I'm really putting a burden on ourselves, to be honest. Of course, I'm also saying that now we sit in these boards. If you find a CEO who thinks that transformation is a negative, get rid of that CEO. Get rid of him. He's bad for that business. And get the one who understands that transformation is meant to make a difference in this country. And we have seen examples of that. Transformation is not equivalent to corruption as we normally say. No, transformation means exactly that. Bring the people who are excluded into the system. And that's your low-hanging fruit, and not continue as in before. It can't be business as usual.
So I also want to get to know Ms. Gloria Serobe outside of business, outside of the boardroom and your leadership role. So when it comes to the home front or away from work, how would you best describe yourself as Gloria Serobe?
Oh, I'm like everyone else. Away from work, I am a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a makoti. I am all those things that are now family systems. And I think the big thing there is that you have to make sure that you don't confuse the two things. Once you leave your office and you come back home, be that which is expected to be a home. You are not a CEO of your husband or children. You are the mother now, you are the wife, you are all of those kinds of things. That's me. And I guess away from work, for me, it's always payback time. I always have to reward myself for having worked so hard. That's me outside of work.
That's very interesting, because I think for many women, especially the higher they climb the corporate ladder, the more difficult some of the work relations seem to be, the home relations seem to become, because you're trying to balance, all of this. But when you say that when you get home, be that which you are expected to be, and more pertinently, when you say you are not the CEO of your husband and your children at home. You know, this is perhaps something that a lot of women struggle with. So what advice would you have for them?
The advice I have is that don't confuse the boardroom now and your other rooms in the house. Those are two different things. And children expect a mother. And I do say that we also are managing to do that. The difference, though, Sanika, is that I just want to release women also from, especially the young professional wives, that the idea that they think they can balance family and home and business to such an extent is not quite practical. There's only so many hours in a day. And so when you come back home at 5 o'clock, sometimes you are so tired and that you can't not fail at home. I don't want that to be seen as failure. I want that to be seen as you are a normal human being and you are trying to do your best as in career and also as at home. And sometimes one of those two things is going to fail. But we have the privilege, especially in South Africa, that we do have extended families and extended homes. We've got mothers-in-laws, we've got mothers. They're all doting grandmothers to these children. Allow them to do that. They are your support system. And so you take the guilt out of ourselves and actually do the best that you can. But we can't kill ourselves and think that in a day of 8 hours, you're going to be the best in both. I think we need to release ourselves of that and do our best in both sides. If you are pushing your career at work and there's a big ExCo meeting in the afternoon, you can't be rushing to somewhere and leave that behind. So you need to source help, and we do have help in families. And we shouldn't be struggling, actually.
And that's so interesting. I always say to my colleagues, the thing about children, they are the great equalizers. They don't care that when you walk out on the streets, people are asking to take selfies with you. When you get home, you are just the mother. They just want food on the table and whatever they want. They really don't care about who you are in the boardroom. But just finally, Ms. Serobe, you know, you spoke about, when I asked you who you are outside of the boardroom, one of the things you said, I'm a makoti. You spoke now again about extended family networks, you know, and you mentioned your mother-in-law. And last week, incidentally, you did launch a book dedicated to your mother-in-law. And just talk to us about that relationship and why your mother-in-law has been such a great influence on you.
My mother-in-law was a nurse by profession, so herself she was a career woman. She was also a strong community worker, and she herself was a mother, was a wife, was a makoti at some point. And so I think when we did come in as her daughters-in-laws, she understood that struggle a lot. And I have to say, Sakina, all of us, she threw everything at her daughters-in-laws to make it work for them. She wanted us to be successful career women. She also wanted us to be good leaders in the family setup. She also was of home and where she can take them away from us. She did that. And lastly for me, she directed my energy towards community work, something I didn't know much about. But I ended up working with her to all these meetings, whether it is Ikageng Women's Club or Black Consumer Union or Black Housewives Leagues and YWCA and so on, so on. So I learned about community work from her. And so in my mind, my tribute to her is that she could sensitively take me to those places where she thought I am the strongest and make best use of me. And she could take care of me on those parts where she thought I am the weakest and give me the support that I needed. As a result, what I'm not surprised with is that I've managed to do very well in business and in career, and also done very well at home as well. She actually made it work.
Well, Ms. Serobe, that's an absolutely wonderful note on which to leave it, and may more of us today be those mother-in-laws that you had the privilege to learn from, Ms. Winnie Serobe, and of course we wish you well during this Women's Month and of course beyond. Thank you so much for speaking to us here on Morning Live. That was one of South Africa's leading business women, Ms. Gloria Serobe, as we continue to basically give their flowers to the women of South Africa during this month.